Hello everyone, and welcome back to a brand new video here on Bridgerton Chronicles. Today, we're diving into the real ending of the Bridgerton sibling stories. But wait, what do we mean by the real ending? Well, it turns out there's actually a 9th book in the Bridgerton series by Julia Quinn titled Happily Ever After. This book gives us a brief but revealing glimpse of what happens after each sibling's story ends. It also ties up several loose ends that were left unresolved in the earlier novels. Did Francesca and Michael ever have a child? Does Simon finally read his father's letters? How does Eloise react when Penelope confesses she's Lady Whistledown? We'll be answering these questions, and a few more, in today's video. So without further ado, let's dive in. The Duke and I, second epilogue. In the heart of London, where secrets are tucked away in yellowed letters and silence often weighs more than words, Daphne Basset, Duchess of Hastings, discovered that life still had surprises in store for her. She was 41 years old, with 4 children nearly grown, and a life that seemed to have found its perfect rhythm. But one day, as she counted the days on her calendar with almost obsessive precision, she reached day 43. It wasn't just any number. It was a sign she couldn't ignore. Her body, wise and steady as a finely kept clock, was telling her something her mind took longer to accept. She was pregnant. The silence that followed that realization was thick, heavy with memories and long-sleeping emotions. 17 years had passed since her last pregnancy. 17 years of folded diapers, sleepless nights, and children's laughter echoing through the halls. To think it was all beginning again, just when she had started imagining herself as a grandmother, left her breathless. It wasn't fear she felt, but a strange blend of wonder, tenderness, and a shy joy she wasn't quite ready to name. She knew she couldn't carry this news alone. She needed the one woman who had always understood the mysteries of love, the body, and family. Her mother, Violet Bridgerton. The journey to her childhood home was a whirlwind of thoughts. Every creak of the carriage, every shadow passing by the window, seemed to whisper that her life was about to change once again. When she finally stood before her mother, the words came out softly, almost trembling, as if speaking them too loudly might shatter something fragile. But Violet's reaction was immediate and warm. There were no doubts, no warnings about age or risks, only a radiant smile and laughter that filled the room. For Violet, a new member of the family was always a blessing, no matter when they arrived. With renewed spirits, Daphne returned home. Now came the hardest part, telling Simon. Simon Basset, the man who had once sworn never to have children, who had fought against his own destiny to build a life with her, believed that chapter was closed forever. When he entered the room, wearing that intense gaze that still made her feel like the young debutante who had danced with him during her first season, Daphne knew the moment had come. She took his hands, felt the familiar warmth of his skin, and told him the truth. Simon froze. His expressive eyes shifted from confusion to shock, and then to something deeper, a light of pure love that seemed to brighten the entire room. He didn't speak at first. He simply pulled her into his arms, as if wanting to protect her, and at the same time, reassure himself that this was real. In the months that followed, the Hastings household transformed. Not just because of the visible preparations, new cradles, soft fabrics, lists of names, but because of a shift in the atmosphere. It felt closer, more intimate, more united. Their older children, nearly grown now, received the news with curiosity and affection. It showed in the way they cared for their mother, in the gentle teasing, in the knowing glances. Daphne experienced this pregnancy in a way she never had in her youth. There was no constant anxiety, no lingering insecurity, only a deep calm, a quiet trust in her body, and in the love that surrounded her. Yet amid this sweet anticipation, a ghost from the past resurfaced. For years, Daphne had kept a bundle of letters written by Simon's father, the former Duke of Hastings, a cruel man who had denied his son not only affection, but even speech. Simon had rejected those letters with a coldness that barely concealed his pain. But Daphne, guided by her protective intuition, had hidden them away. waiting for the right moment. Now, with their family stronger than ever, she felt it was time to offer him one last bridge back to his past. One evening, beside the glow of the fireplace, she brought them out. They were tied with a ribbon worn thin by time, as though the paper itself knew it had been waiting for decades. She handed them to Simon gently, almost reverently. The air thickened with suspense. What had that man written before his death? Had he asked for forgiveness? Had he shown even the smallest trace of humanity? Simon held the letters in silence. He looked at the paper, then at Daphne, finally at her belly, where new life was growing. And he made his choice. He didn't open them. He didn't need to. He didn't need the words of a man who had never known how to love him in order to know who he was now. With a calm born from years of healing, he rose, walked to the fireplace, and threw the letters into the flames. Daphne watched quietly as the paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash. It was symbolic. It was final. The legacy of contempt, of impossible expectations, of silence, burned before their eyes. Simon didn't need that past to build his future. He was already the husband, the father, the man his own father had never managed to be. The emotion of that moment wrapped around them like a warm tide. Simon turned to Daphne and kissed her, first on the nose, then on the lips, sealing a vow that required no old documents. He reminded her that the only thing that mattered was the present, the home they had built, the love that bound them, and the new life growing inside her. That baby would not enter a world of conditions or broken expectations. It would enter a home where love was given freely, without asking for anything in return. Meanwhile, at the Bridgerton family gatherings, another topic stirred conversation. Georgie, the youngest son of Colin Bridgerton and Penelope Featherington, still had not spoken. Some watched him with concern, others with impatience. But Simon, with the wisdom of someone who had overcome his own history of forced silence, offered the best advice possible. Just love him. If the boy chose to speak, he would. If not, he would still be loved just as fiercely. Those words reflected everything Simon had learned, that a person's worth does not depend on what they say, do, or achieve, but on the simple fact that they exist. The little Basset, soon to be born, would bring more laughter into their home. But more than that, he would stand as a living symbol of victory, the victory of a man who chose love over trauma, and of a woman whose faith never once wavered. The Viscount Who Loved Me, second epilogue. In the heart of Aubrey Hall, where the gardens stretch wide like bursts of laughter, and every spring brings with it a new family battle, Anthony Bridgerton savored his victory with the calm of a man who had finally defeated his greatest rival, his own wife. He had achieved the unthinkable. For the first time in years, he held in his hands the black mallet, that feared and coveted relic known among his family as the Mallet of Death. He twirled it between his fingers with a devilish grin, while Kate Sharma stood in the shed doorway, her eyes blazing with fury and disappointment. But this was not a story of defeat. It was a love story disguised as war. Because in the Bridgerton family, the game of pall-mall was more than just a pastime. It was a ritual, a duel of wit, betrayal, and affection, hidden behind fierce teasing and fleeting alliances. And no one played it better than Kate and Anthony. 15 years of marriage had turned their relationship into a perfect dance of provocation and reconciliation. She had beaten him year after year, stealing the mallet before the big day. But this time, he struck first. He paid his valet £5 to provide a believable distraction, catching her completely off guard. When she entered the shed humming "Mine, mine, mine" like a victorious witch, there he stood, impeccable, mallet in hand, wearing a smile that promised sweet revenge. Kate, however, did not surrender. The very next day, she reappeared with an even more dangerous smile. She had made a copy of the key to Anthony's office, where he had hidden his prize, and stolen the mallet without so much as a sound. No dramatic entrance, just silence, cunning, and determination. He roared her name through the halls. "Cut!" But she was already hiding her trophy somewhere not even Sherlock Holmes himself could find. The true chaos arrived on the day of the match. Everyone was there: Daphne and Simon, Colin and Penelope, Edwina, and even Anthony and Kate's eldest children, watching in awe as their parents turned a simple game into an epic saga. It was Colin who appeared holding the black mallet, declaring himself the winner before the game had even begun. He had bribed a maid with £10, double what Anthony had paid his valet. Outrage spread instantly, followed by laughter, because that was what bound them together: the ability to laugh, even in the middle of betrayal. When the match finally began, every swing carried intention. Every shot concealed a trap. Kate had poured tea across the lawn, creating a strategic puddle. Anthony, without mercy, sent her stumbling face first into the mud. Furious, she returned the favor, sending his ball rolling downhill with a masterful strike that left him helpless. As the sun set over the field, Anthony and Kate walked back to the house side by side. They were covered in mud, exhausted, happy. It didn't matter who had won. What mattered was that they were still playing, together. Even when they pretended to hate each other, even when they stole secrets or pushed each other into the mud, they did it because they knew that, at the end of the day, one would always be waiting for the other, with a towel and a knowing smile. An Offer from a Gentleman, second epilogue. On a sunny summer afternoon, in the heart of the English countryside, Posy Riling discovered that life could begin again at 25. Many already considered her a spinster, a woman whose time on the marriage market had come and gone without much notice. But Posy was not like the others, not because she was dazzling or extraordinarily beautiful, but because she possessed something far more valuable: a kindness so deep it could illuminate even the darkest corners of another person's soul. Her childhood had not been easy. Raised beneath the shadow of an ambitious mother and a breathtaking sister, Posy learned early on how to make herself invisible. Her gowns were always modest, her accomplishments overlooked, her presence tolerated rather than celebrated. For years, she moved through society like a gentle ghost, smiling when she hurt, remaining silent when she longed to scream. But everything changed the day she chose to do the right thing, even though it meant risking everything. It was then that Violet Bridgerton, with that unique blend of firmness and warmth only a mother of 8 could possess, welcomed her into her home as if she had always belonged. Within that house, overflowing with laughter, secrets, and love, Posy began to bloom. She was no longer the plain sister or the forgotten daughter. She was simply Posy, intelligent, loyal, with eyes that seemed to understand pain without a single word being spoken. And yet, even in that refuge, a quiet restlessness remained. While her friends found husbands and built families, she stayed single. Not for lack of desire, but because men rarely looked beyond her appearance or her apparent shyness. Most treated her politely, some with pity, and none with longing. No one, until Hugh Woodson arrived. He was no fairy tale prince. He didn't ride with dramatic flair or recite poetry beneath the moonlight. He was a vicar, simple, sincere, with a smile that seemed made to calm storms. And when he stepped into the Bridgerton drawing room that afternoon, something shifted. There were no fanfares, no calculated glances, just a suspended moment in time where two souls recognized their equal without needing introductions. Posy saw him and felt her heart, silent for 25 years, finally awaken. Hugh looked at her and knew with a certainty that came not from reason, but from somewhere deeper, that he had found the perfect woman. There were no forced flirtations, no empty compliments, only a connection so natural that it felt as though it had always been written in the stars. Sophie Bridgerton, watching from the sofa with a teacup in hand, could barely contain her emotion. She, who had lived her own impossible fairy tale, recognized the signs of true love instantly. It wasn't fire or reckless passion. It was calm. It was peace. It was the certainty that someone sees you exactly as you are and chooses you anyway. Their conversation was awkward, sweet, and entirely genuine. "Do you like roses, Miss Riling?" Hugh asked. She nodded, and he promised to bring her an entire bouquet. With a mischievous smile, Sophie suggested they take a walk in the garden. They didn't even finish their tea. They slipped outside together, and moments later, as Sophie and her husband watched from the study window, they shared their first kiss. Tender, urgent, filled with unspoken promises. It wasn't a kiss born of scandal or drama. It was the kiss of two people who, after years of feeling incomplete, had finally found their place in the world. Benedict, ever the romantic painter in his own way, murmured that he would secure a special marriage license at once. Sophie, tears in her eyes, agreed. She knew this was the happy ending Posey had always deserved. The wedding was simple, intimate, perfect. Posey glowed, not because of her gown or jewels, but because happiness radiated from her very being. Hugh looked at her as though she were the greatest miracle that had ever occurred. And perhaps she was. In a world that rewards superficial perfection, they had chosen each other for their humanity, for their scars, for their capacity to love without conditions. The years that followed brought a lively, love-filled household. First came Sophia, named after the woman who had given Posey a home, then Benedict, after the brother-in-law who had treated her like a sister. Next was Georgette, in honor of Hugh's mother, and John, after his father. 4 children raised among books, laughter, and the certainty that love comes in many forms. But the story did not end there. Just when everyone believed their family was complete, Posey surprised them all once more. In her early 30s, she gave birth to another daughter, and in a gesture that left Sophie speechless, she chose to name her Araminta. It was not a tribute to the mother who had made her feel invisible. It was an act of reconciliation with herself. By giving her daughter that name, Posey reclaimed its meaning, strength, dignity, possibility. And to soften it, she called her Minty, a tender nickname that erased any trace of bitterness. Minty grew into a spirited child, with her father's luminous smile and her mother's quiet determination. From her very first cry, it was clear she would be a leader, not a follower. And as Posey watched her grow, she knew the circle had closed. The little girl who had never been loved by her own mother was now raising a daughter who would know from her very first day that she was loved unconditionally. Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, second epilogue. After days of worry, Colin Bridgerton returned home with the wind in his hair and a mischievous smile on his lips. Penelope Featherington was waiting for him, her heart racing, not because of his charm, though it still melted her, but because of the news he carried. Eloise Bridgerton had not married. Not yet. She had run away, yes, in secret, leaving behind only a vague note that had ignited panic throughout the entire Bridgerton family. Worst of all, she hadn't even told her best friend Penelope what she was planning. Colin, as relaxed as if he had just returned from a leisurely Sunday stroll, avoided answering her most important questions. "There was never an appropriate moment," he said, his eyes gleaming with that familiar mix of affection and mischief that always unsettled his wife. But Penelope refused to let it go. She knew something more serious was hidden behind his carefree attitude. And then, between sips of tea and glances heavy with unspoken emotion, Colin revealed the truth. He had never told Eloise that Penelope was Lady Whistledown. For 10 years she had written the sharpest gossip in high society. 10 years of keeping that secret, even from her closest friend. Now with Eloise on the verge of marriage, the guilt weighed on her like a stone. Colin, on the other hand, seemed almost entertained by the looming drama. "It will be an excellent marriage," he said, as though the revelation were part of the spectacle. Days later, at Romney Hall, Penelope gazed out from the carriage at the immaculate gardens, wondering how she would face Eloise. Colin slept peacefully beside her, unaware, or perhaps unconcerned, about her inner turmoil. When they finally entered the house, they were greeted with relief and warnings. Violet Bridgerton, the family matriarch, urged them to remain silent. Even Hyacinth Bridgerton, the youngest sister, had been bribed with £20 to keep quiet. "Especially Hyacinth," Colin emphasized, as if that explained everything. In Eloise's room, the atmosphere was tense yet intimate. The Bridgerton sisters fluttered around her like bees around a nervous queen. When Penelope saw her friend, a knot formed in her throat. Eloise looked beautiful, but vulnerable. In a quiet corner, Penelope asked softly, "Do you want this? Do you love him?" Eloise hesitated. "It's complicated," she admitted. And in that single word lay all the uncertainty of a woman torn between duty and desire. Just before the ceremony, Eloise stopped her. "I'm sorry," she said, "for not telling you about Sir Phillip." Penelope, deeply moved, answered immediately, "It's all right." But inside, her guilt only grew stronger. How could she confess now that she had hidden something far greater? After the wedding, Colin couldn't resist asking, "Does she suspect anything?" His conspiratorial grin said it all. Penelope shot him a sharp look, but it was already too late. Hyacinth, swift and curious as ever, had followed them. And when Penelope finally found the courage to speak, Eloise surprised her. "I know," she said. Hyacinth, unable to contain herself, had sold the secret the night before, for £25. Penelope collapsed into a chair, stunned. But Eloise wasn't angry, quite the opposite. "I'm proud of you," she said, her eyes shining. "Keeping all of us in the dark for so long, that's impressive." She even laughed, though there was a trace of sadness behind it. "Everything is different here," she added softly. "I'm not the same person I was in London." The tension dissolved into a sincere embrace, the kind only shared between people who have lived a lifetime of secrets and laughter together. Later, at the inn where Colin and Penelope were staying, 3 letters arrived. Violet's letter forgave them for leaving early, so long as they soon gave her grandchildren. Hyacinth's was surprisingly sweet, filled with clever observations about the wedding. But it was Eloise's letter that made Penelope pale. "My secret was small compared to yours," she wrote. "Now you owe me a favor, and I've already consulted Hyacinth on how to collect it." Colin read over Penelope's shoulder and burst into laughter. "We'll never be safe," Penelope murmured, half joking, half serious. He pulled her close, kissing her neck with a familiarity that had become her refuge. "Then let's not return to London," he suggested. "Let's stay here. No one will think to look for us at the Rose and Bramble." She smiled, letting herself melt into the moment. Because in the end, among secrets, meddling sisters, and promises of playful revenge, the only thing that truly mattered was being together. And perhaps, just perhaps, they would begin to plan that first grandchild Violet longed for so dearly. To Sir Phillip, with love, second epilogue. Amanda Crane was not a patient woman, nor did she have much tolerance for foolishness. That's why she felt rather proud of herself when she left the Brougham's house without saying what she truly thought. Is she an idiot? Mrs. Brougham, her neighbor of 6 years, had just asked her what it was like not to be a twin, as if Amanda had any experience with such a thing. It was absurd. But her mother shot her a warning look, and Amanda kept quiet, not out of politeness, out of respect. She lived with her father, a kind but absent-minded botanist, and her twin brother Oliver, whom she described as charming but somewhat shallow. Her stepmother, Eloise Bridgerton, had entered their lives when they were children, after the death of their first mother, a sad woman who had taken her own life in the depths of winter. Amanda held no clear memories of her, only vague and uneasy feelings. But she knew this: Eloise had saved them all. And though she rarely said it aloud, Amanda was convinced she had the best mother in all of England. That afternoon, as she endured tea with the 4 Brougham daughters, all sweet, all unbearably dull, something shifted. Mrs. Brougham announced the arrival of her nephew Charles, freshly graduated from Oxford. The girls, who had been feigning indifference, straightened like springs. But when they learned it was Charles and not Ian, they deflated just as quickly. One even threatened to hide her dolls. Amanda was intrigued. What sort of man inspired both dread and sudden excitement? The next day, dressed in her riding habit and already sweating beneath the Gloucestershire sun, She waited for the mysterious cousin. When he arrived, he did not come alone. The four sisters clung to his arm as if he were a prize to be displayed. But the moment Amanda saw him, she understood. Charles Faraday had a gaze that felt strangely familiar, like he had known her forever. It wasn't love at first sight. She didn't believe in such nonsense. But it was something close, as though they had already shared secrets in another life. He felt it too. While his cousins chattered endlessly, he kissed her hand with a conspiratorial smile. And when Amanda suggested a ride, her mother, clever as any Bridgerton, sent the girls away with the promise that Oliver would join them shortly. Charles's relief was so visible that he leaned against the wall and laughed. "Thank you," he said, as if she had saved his life. They began on horseback, but soon decided to walk instead. They talked without pause, about mischievous childhoods, impossible siblings, pranks involving flour and unfortunate frogs. Amanda confessed how she and Oliver had once tried to frighten Eloise before she married their father. Charles admitted that his younger brother Ian had always been everyone's favorite, with his angelic face and perfect manners. "But he's a good lad," he added without resentment. In that moment, Amanda knew Charles was different. He truly listened. And she, who rarely opened up, found herself speaking more honestly than ever before. That night, as she sat on the back steps beneath the stars, her father joined her. He asked if she liked the young man. "Yes," she answered, feeling a warm flutter in her chest. Half teasing, half serious, he said he would need to find a very large stick to ward off her suitors. But then, with rare tenderness, he added, "I only hope I've raised you well enough to make sensible choices." 6 months later, Amanda and Charles were married. They settled in Somerset, halfway between their families. Charles began a horse breeding program. Her father, delighted, discovered that raising animals was not so different from cultivating plants. The visits were frequent, perhaps too frequent. Charles invented a game called How Quiet Can Amanda Be?, which they played while her father slept just across the hall. One night, Amanda lost. The next morning, her father departed abruptly, claiming a botanical emergency. Charles, ever mischievous, proposed a new game. How loud can Amanda be? And so, between laughter, shared secrets, and private games, Amanda found something she hadn't even known she was searching for. Not merely a husband, but a partner. Someone who saw her, heard her, loved her exactly as she was. And though her life was not perfect, it was deeply her own. For a woman who valued her independence as fiercely as her heart, that was more than enough. When He Was Wicked, second epilogue. Francesca Bridgerton had been counting for 3 years. She counted the days since her last monthly cycle, the days until she might be fertile, the days until her next cycle, if she did not conceive. But she never conceived. 33 times she had secretly marked the passing of her cycles, hiding each record in a concealed drawer of her desk where her husband would never see. She didn't want to hurt him. Of course, he already knew. She saw it in his eyes, in the forced brightness of his smile at breakfast, in the way he held her just a little tighter during those days. Michael Stirling loved her deeply, so deeply that his greatest wish was simply to see her happy. And what Francesca longed for more than anything in the world was to be a mother. Still, she reminded herself that she was fortunate. She had Michael, intelligent, kind, witty, passionate, a husband who made her laugh, who turned their nights into adventures and their days into peace. She loved him with every heartbeat. Almost always, that was enough. Almost. Because in the silent hours of the night, when he slept and she lay awake, curled against his chest, she felt an emptiness inside her that even his love could not fill. And she would cry quietly, touching her flat abdomen as though she could somehow awaken life within it. Michael suffered too. At first, only for her. But in time, the pain became his own. Watching the Bridgerton nieces and nephews, members of a remarkably fertile family, run through the halls shouting, "Uncle Michael," and begging for sweets reminded him of what they lacked. He wanted to give her that miracle, more than anything. One day, Francesca traveled alone to Kent for the christening of Isabella, the daughter of her sister Hyacinth Bridgerton. Michael would arrive later, detained in Scotland on estate matters. Walking through the corridors of Aubrey Hall, everything felt achingly familiar. The cream-colored walls, the Fragonard painting her father had once gifted her mother. There, with Violet Bridgerton, she shared a conversation that barely required words. It lived in glances, gestures, heavy silences. When Violet mentioned that Lucy, Gregory's wife, was expecting again, and that Eloise was also with child, Francesca felt the blow. But this time, she did not carry it alone. She collapsed into her mother's arms, and, for the first time in years, let her grief pour out without shame. Something shifted inside her. The sadness did not vanish, but its weight lessened. When Michael finally arrived, he found a different Francesca, lighter, more present. She played with her nieces and nephews, laughed without forcing it, even danced in the garden with young Charlotte. One afternoon, out in the fields, she took his hand and pulled him down the hill. Without a word, she straddled him and claimed him with a renewed urgency, a fierce joy he had not seen in months. Michael, startled and overwhelmed, followed her lead. In that moment, they both felt it. Something had changed. They did not know what, only that they were entirely, completely together. Days later, after an afternoon spent playing with the children, Michael casually asked if it wasn't nearly time for her monthly cycle. She paused. No, it wasn't. It was still early. But both of them felt the same quiet certainty. This time was different. Francesca placed her hands over her abdomen and whispered, "He's there." There were no signs, no nausea, no proof, only a deep, steady calm, a knowing that required no confirmation. Michael wanted to shout with joy, but he restrained himself. They chose to keep it secret, a treasure belonging only to them. A year later, Francesca returned to Aubrey Hall. This time, she did not arrive alone. She stepped down from the carriage carrying a small bundle in her arms. Violet hurried forward, delighted to see her daughter after so long. But when she noticed the bundle, she stopped short. Francesca gently placed the baby into her mother's arms and said softly, "Mother, this is John." Violet burst into tears. The child was beautiful, with Francesca's eyes, her mouth, her nose, and, according to Michael, his charm. Laughter and tears blended together as the entire family gathered around the newest arrival. For the first time in years, the emptiness in Francesca's heart was filled with something real, tangible, alive. And 9 months later, Janet Helen Stirling was born, a little girl who was the very image of her father. As Francesca held her 2 children close, she realized something profound. Love did not merely exist. It was generous, patient, and sometimes, after a long wait, it arrived twice over. It's in his kiss. Second epilogue. Hyacinth St. Clair knew the moment had come. She had become her mother. Sitting in the elegant dress shop of Madame Langlois, she fought the urge to bury her face in her hands as her daughter Isabella rejected one debutante dress after another. No pink, no purple, and absolutely not white, Isabella declared, with that familiar mix of sweetness and iron determination that reminded Hyacinth far too much of herself. Hyacinth sighed. Yes, Violet Bridgerton had been right. Having a daughter exactly like oneself was both a blessing and an exquisite punishment. Isabella, with her strawberry-colored curls and sharp tongue, was just as stubborn as Hyacinth had ever been. But she was also brilliant, passionate, vividly alive. Hyacinth loved her with a fierceness that sometimes took her breath away. Still, she refused to give in on the matter of the white dress. Some traditions deserved to be honored, if only to irritate a daughter who was far too clever for her own good. Meanwhile, in his study, Gareth St. Clair enjoyed a glass of brandy after a flawless day. Through discipline and determination, he had restored his family's name and fortune. His life was built on order, success, and above all, love. Love, especially. After 22 years of marriage, he still felt a thrill every time Hyacinth entered a room. That afternoon, as he imagined how she might look in the delicate French silk ensemble he had purchased for her, she burst in, her eyes blazing. Not because of dresses, but because of something far more serious. Their daughter still refused to consider marriage. Before the conversation could escalate, Gareth did what always worked. He pulled her into his arms, loosened the buttons of her dress, and within minutes, she was breathless against the sofa. Hyacinth, though she pretended to resist, always surrendered. Because after all these years, she still desired him with the same urgency as in the very beginning. And Gareth, with his mischievous smile, knew that would never change. The next day, Hyacinth returned to her quiet obsession, the jewels. For 16 years, ever since they had moved into Clair House, she had searched relentlessly for a hidden family treasure her late father-in-law had sworn existed. Gareth no longer believed in it. The servants thought she was mad. But she could not give up. Not when every tile, every crack, every forgotten corner of the old nursery bathroom seemed to whisper clues. That afternoon, something changed. Among the Turkish tiles, she noticed a nearly invisible fracture. Her heart racing, she used her small chisel. With a soft snap, one tile loosened. Behind it, a hollow space, and inside, a velvet pouch. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Brilliant diamonds surrounded by aquamarines sparkled back at her, as if they had been waiting for her all along. "Gareth," she cried, running downstairs with the jewels draped around her neck. "I found them." He rushed down, stunned. Seeing her radiant, he kissed her hand and slid a ring onto her finger. She laughed, cried, and danced. She had won. Not just the jewels, but proof that her intuition, her persistence, her faith in the unseen had been right all along. Upstairs, in her bedroom, Isabella had heard everything from her chair by the window. She smiled, because those jewels had been hers first. She had found them 9 years earlier, hidden behind that very same tile. She had never told anyone. Perhaps she enjoyed possessing a secret. Or perhaps, deep down, she knew her mother needed to find them for herself. Now, hearing Hyacinth's cries of joy, Isabella understood she had done the right thing. She had allowed her mother her triumph, her redemption, her moment of glory. Because Hyacinth had never truly been searching for wealth. She had been searching for meaning, and by giving her that discovery without ever saying a word, Isabella had given her the greatest gift of all, the certainty that she had never been wrong. On the way to the wedding, second epilogue. Lucy Bridgerton lay in her bed, exhausted but happy. She had just given birth to her 8th and 9th children, twin girls, 9 children in total. Gregory Bridgerton stood beside her, his expression a blend of awe, pride, and boundless tenderness. Years had passed since that mad dash to the church, since the secrets, the blackmail, and the love that had nearly slipped through their fingers. Now, in their home in Berkshire, life was filled with laughter, chaos, and the comfortable rhythm of a large, loving family. But the joy did not last. Lucy began to feel unwell. Her body, so accustomed to childbirth, was not responding as it always had. She turned pale. Her voice weakened. Then came the silence. The midwife discovered the worst: internal hemorrhaging. Blood stained the sheets as Gregory, frantic, ran for towels and shouted orders he wasn't even sure would help. Hyacinth St. Clair arrived just in time to catch him when his legs nearly gave way. In the middle of the panic, no one spoke of hope, only action. The midwife pressed hard against Lucy's abdomen. Lucy screamed, then fell silent. Her hand, once warm, turned cold in Gregory's grip. He repeated her name over and over like a charm against death. "La, la, la, Lucy," he whispered desperately, mimicking the childish sing-song their daughter Hermione used, searching for any sign of life. There was none, only the faint breathing of someone hovering at the edge. Hyacinth, fierce as ever, did not cry. She remained steady, commanding, assisting, holding her brother together when he seemed ready to shatter. She knew that if she faltered, Everything would collapse. Outside, the children played, unaware that their world might break apart at any moment. Inside, the air smelled of sweat, fear, and iron. Hours later, Dr. Jarvis returned. Exhausted, he examined Lucy and, without ceremony, shook her roughly. "Wake up," he demanded. Gregory protested, but the doctor was right. They needed to know if she was still there, if her mind would respond. It was Catherine, their eldest daughter, who offered the first glimmer of hope. Without anyone realizing it, she had been in the room earlier, watching her mother with that quiet intelligence and tenderness that were uniquely hers. And it was Catherine who calmly suggested the twins' middle names, Eloise Lucy and Francesca Hyacinth. A subtle, perfect tribute, full of love. When Lucy opened her eyes the next day, it was with thirst and confusion, but also with life. She asked to see her children. She didn't want them to see her weak, but they already knew. They entered in a line, from Catherine to little Colin, and embraced her gently, as though afraid she might break. In that moment, Lucy knew the fight had been worth it. She smiled, faint but real, and said, "I love you all." Even the babies she had not yet properly met. Gregory, standing at the doorway, wept in silence. Not for the fear he had endured, but for the certainty that he had almost lost her, and that she had come back. Because that was Lucy, strong, practical, filled with quiet love. She was not the dramatic heroine he once imagined himself seeking. She was better. She was home. Meanwhile, in a letter to her husband, Hyacinth wrote with her usual frankness, "I'm not certain she would have survived without me. I said some very serious words to her. I may even have threatened to maim her if she didn't wake up." Beneath the sarcasm pulsed relief. She loved Lucy too, though it had taken her years to admit it. Well, friends, that's it for today's video. There's actually a 9th epilogue, but it focuses on Violet and her love story with Edmund, and we already have a dedicated video about it here on the channel. If you'd like to watch it, I'll leave it linked right up here or down in the description below. As always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget that the best way to support us is by leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.